Hi folks, Ernie here. I for the longest time have had this giant compressor that I bought used, and the only way I had it hooked up was these hose reels here and a quick disconnect here to hook it up. And I at various times I decided I needed to have shop air other places in my shop, and I would always temporarily just string hoses around my shop. That got to be a pain, especially when I started needing to run some upstairs overhead here, which upstairs from here is a loft that has a lot of my gear in there for making circuit boards, 3D printing, and things like that. So it would be handy to have some air up there. So I got a kit to install shop air in the shop and distribute it around the shop. And first off, I didn't know if um, people still did it the old fashioned way where they run iron pipes like this right here, run it around the shop. That seemed like a lot of trouble. So I thought, well, there's got to be a more modern way of doing that, and there is. And here, this is finished now, but this plastic tubing, very similar to what they use in houses now for water, and that's called PEX. This is a different name, but anyway, I'm going to show you how I went through that with some details here. So stand by. This is the kit I got from Amazon, and as I said in the intro, I did not want to have to go through the process of installing iron pipe around the shop like people used to do. And a little research, I found that yeah, there is a new, more modern way of doing that that's much more convenient, and that's what this kit is here. I see that there's other brands you can get. This is from what it shows here. But you can get some of this stuff at like Menards and things like that. Now this, a lot of houses nowadays use what's called PEX for water lines, and this is kind of like that in that it's high density polyethylene, HDPE. However, this is 3 layers, 2 layers of HDPE with aluminum in between the two, which makes it nice and formable, and it holds its shape and stuff like that. It holds higher pressures. And instead of crimp connections or pushing connections, you have these somewhat, I guess you call them compression fittings, where there's a compression ring in there when you tighten it down. So it's pretty cool. Now in my shop, it's going to run over 100 feet. So I chose to get the 200 feet set and 3/4 inch diameter. For that long of a run, most people would recommend a 3/4 inch. For my shop, my uses, I probably could have gotten by with a 1/2 inch, but it seemed like 3/4 was the way to go. You can see all the parts here. We'll go over these in detail a little bit later. Some of these are already assembled, but anyway, that's the kit, and I'll put the part link to that for Amazon in the description. Here's the parts that I actually received. You can see all of them here. This is a lot bigger than it looks like in the picture at when you order it. It turned out it weighed like 35 pounds or more, so it was a heavy box. But you could expect that with 3/4 inch line. The bend radius on this stuff is actually pretty good. They say the inside bend radius is 6 to 8 inches, and that's amazingly tight. You need to be careful when you're bending that. It's not hard to bend, but if you're not careful, you can kink it. I did not wind up kinking any of it, so that's a good deal. But I formed it by hand and other body parts where I bend it around my stomach or around my leg or whatever, and it worked out pretty good. So let me go through some of the parts here. These are all just aluminum blocks that are, you could call them manifolds or whatever, but you have actually 4 different ports on it. 3 of them are 1/2 inch pipe thread, and the other port is 3/8 pipe thread. These clips are for mounting them to whatever surface you're going to put them on, and I had to make some modifications on those, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. This bag of screws and toggles, those may be useful for masonry if you drill a hole in brick or concrete, but I found these to be pretty much worthless on drywall, and the screws themselves are fairly inexpensive screws. I was able to twist the head off of one of them, and it was easy to strip out the slot or the X for the Phillips screwdriver. So you may wind up using your own screws for these as you go through here. This tool right here is for beveling the inside of the tube when you cut it off. This is a pair of cutters that that do an amazingly easy job of cutting through that pipe. I mean, it just slices through real easy. These parts here are all for connecting the blue pipe to some various pipe threads. 4 of these are one size. I think they're half-inch. 4 of these are half-inch, and one of them is 3/4 inch. That 3/4 inch doesn't fit any of these blocks. It's too big, but it might fit your compressor or whatever. These are T junctions, some ball valves here, and then one right angle. I was surprised it only had one right angle in the kit, and so if you need more than that, you may want to order some separately. And then it came with some gloves. As with any project, you will undoubtedly run into little things you have to fix along the way that kind of add to the project. And on this one of the things I had was a leak on my regulator. This is off the big compressor. I had it before, and I've continually had troubles with a little bit of a leak through the gap here. Even when it was fairly new, I tried taking it apart. This part right here just slides off the back, and these two come apart, and there's really not a lot of compressive force holding those two together. So I didn't find the O-ring to work very good. I tried using sealer, it didn't work. However, anyway, I decided I'd give it another shot, see if I could find a way to stop that leak since I'm doing this bigger project. And I took it apart, and I discovered that inside here is a pipe thread. So, and the other side has it too. So I thought, well, maybe they threaded this so that you can put a little nipple in there and use Teflon tape and pipe dope and be able to tighten it up tight enough to get this back on there and fix the leak. And it turned out that it worked that way. Here it is. I bought an extra short nipple, and they called it close. They didn't give a real link to it. And I used some pipe thread compound. In the past, I've usually just used Teflon tape, but on this project, I decided to use both Teflon tape and this pipe thread compound. And there it is. I was able to screw that together tight enough to get this bracket back on there. I have to admit, it took a bit of torque. It was a tight fit, but when I got done, there was no leak. And I've had that leak for years now, and I'm glad to get that fixed. To get this on and off the compressor, I had to rotate the pipes. There's enough movement here that I was able to tip those pipes out and then spin this on and off this pipe here, and then put it back in position. And then once you have it in position, there's a bolt that holds it to the compressor right there. So we got that taken care of. The kit recommended connecting to the compressor with a flexible line, and in my case I strongly agree with that because my compressor's on wheels, and there could be some movement. And plus, you know, you may want to work on your compressor and reposition it once in a while. So having a flexible line will help out, and that keeps the vibration from getting in your air distribution system. Now, the kit did not come with a flexible line, so I got on Amazon and ordered this half-inch line with half-inch pipe threads here, and it came with the adapters to adapt that to other sizes. So I got that, and I also bought the T-fitting to use on that as well. Now, this valve is from the kit. This valve is a 3/8 inch size. This this regulator is all 3/8 inch all the way through. So these parts I put in here are all 3/8 inch pipe thread, and then an adapter here to go up to the half-inch for this flexible line. The flexible line was going to feed into need to feed into a block or a T, so I could split one line off and go upstairs, and then the other line's going to go to the rest of the shop. But I had to get around a beam that was there, so I decided to use one of these manifolds. And now this is a picture of the manifold from one side, and you can see two of the ports. And again, this one is half-inch pipe thread. This is 3/8, and if you flip it around the other way, you have two more half-inch ports here. It's got these plugs already installed, but a caution: those plugs are not sealed. They're just conveniently located there. So if you're going to leave them in there, you're going to have to put your tape and pipe dope on those. Now, some of the fittings that I was going to put on here, I could tell that my existing wrenches were not going to fit in there because a regular crescent wrench or a regular wrench is a little bit too thick. So I decided to make me a couple of wrenches. To do that, I cut up this lawnmower blade here, this old lawnmower blade, and you can see the cuts where I cut it in sections. And these two flat parts here, I'm going to cut into wrenches. Now, my first go at this, making the slot, I used my milling machine and high-speed steel cutter, which turned out to be not a wise thing to do because it turns out lawnmower blades are very tough metal, and I made a lot of blue chips, probably ruined my mill cutter. So I reverted to using an angle grinder and cut these out, and that worked out pretty nicely. Here are the two tools. You can tell they're fairly thin, like a lawnmower blade, and these fit two different places on the fittings that we're going to be using. And I was able to get enough grip on these to put the torque on there I needed, and it worked out pretty good. And I had to make these pretty thin to fit into where I was going to go, and having the tough metal of the lawnmower blade was a good thing. Hi, I'm Ernie, and I thought I'd take a break here and show you how to do some of the individual steps on this process. Here's the pipe that we're using, and as I mentioned, it's flexible. You can bend it. It's stiff, but you can bend it. You got to make sure you don't kink it and it stays back in place, or you can straighten it back out. I wouldn't bend it back and forth too many times, but you get the idea. Also, cutters. It comes with cutters, and this is 2 layers of HDPE and a layer of aluminum, but this cutter just goes through it real nice. It's surprising how well it does that. So next step, you take this tool, which bevels the inside edge. You put that in there, twist, and you can see some shavings come off of there. And now the inside edge of that's nicely beveled. Then this part. This part has 2 O-rings in there, and then a flat seat to set against down there. They say soapy water will help you get it on there, but I didn't have any trouble of getting that to seat all the way up there. The thing I didn't do before I did that is, let me get it off here. You got to make sure you get your
nut and compression ring on here first. And then you seat that like we talked about. Seat it nice and tight. Push this up here and then tighten it up. Now, they say to go finger tight, then mark it, and then go 3/4 of a turn or until tight. And here's one of the wrenches I made to help do that. This is made for the bigger one. The other wrench I made was for the smaller one, but this part here is a bigger thread, so the little wrench won't fit. But you go on here and you put an additional 3/4 of a turn on that seat, and or until you can't turn it anymore. And there, that's pretty tight. That's not going to leak right there. That's not going to leak. So I'm not sure if that's a full 3/4, but all the ones on my shop that I did a lot like that work just fine. But I will show you one other thing on here is the tape and pipe sealer. The instructions that came with the Teflon tape. This is regular old Teflon plumber's tape. It says to put 2 wraps on here. Let me get a clean piece here. There, get that off of there. Wrap it on there flat. If I can do this. There we go. The instructions that came with the tape say to put 2 wraps on it. The other instructions I've seen say to put 3 to 5 wraps on it. I actually like to put 4 or 5, and the reason for that is two may get the job done, but the more wraps you get on there, the more flexibility you have when it comes to positioning this on here. Now I'll show you what I mean on that. Let me get some of this pipe goop, this pipe sealer, and put it on here. You don't need much. You just put a little bit around there, all the way around. Then you can thread it in here. Now this is a 3/8 inch, and you can start turning it. Now, I like to hold the block with another wrench, and so I don't pull it out of the wall, but you start turning this tighter, and right there it's probably tight enough to seal right there, but you want to be able to position this valve lever a certain direction. Some parts it doesn't matter which direction they're facing, but if you have enough Teflon tape on there, like right there, I'm sure it's sealed because I turned it pretty tight. But if I needed to position it more, I can turn this an entire turn more and position it where I want. And any of those places along that turn, it's going to be sealed. So that's why I err towards more wraps of Teflon tape, just so that you're able to reposition those. Anyway, that's kind of the details on how to do that. You'd use the same process for this, wrapping it with the tape, and also on these plugs that they have in here. Again, they don't come sealed, so you're going to have to seal those yourself. So there we go.
Okay, I mentioned that I was going to need to get around a beam, and you'll see that in a picture in a little bit. But I decided to make this bracket out of some aluminum channel that I had. This is going to require some assembly ahead of time to get it all fit together, but this is the channel I made. 2 holes here are going to be for lag screws that hit the center of the beam, and then this is where the block is going to install. And yeah, there's a lag screws. It's not going to be very much of a load, and so a couple of lag screws will work there. Now here's that block, and here's where one of those wrenches is going to go. You can tell that's a fairly thin nut or flanges there, and a regular crescent wrench just isn't going to go in here. And then the bigger wrench is going to have to tighten this down. Now, according to the instructions, uh, when you put your pipe on here, you're supposed to tighten this down finger tight and then mark it, and then use your wrench to turn it another 3/4 of a turn or until tight. So that larger wrench was going to have to clear these flanges of the channel as I tightened that down in there, and it worked out nicely. And again, I used Teflon tape and the pipe dope. And here's the other side. This part had to be installed prior to mounting the block in here, and and then I had to make sure that to leave the heads on this side so that I could get the wrench on here when we go to install the pipe on there. Okay, there's a flexible pipe connected on this end, and so it's ready to go up on the wall. And here's how it's installed. This is the beam I was talking about. These are 3 2x12s put together. Putting the screws in the center is the place where the beam can tolerate, you don't have to worry about drilling holes in your beam if you do it right there in the middle. A blue line is going to go off the back of this and then go upstairs following this I-beam right here. And then another blue line is going to come up here and go to the rest of the shop. So that's that flexible line. There it is, secured, tied down here. This is the line that goes up following this I-beam, goes upstairs, and I was able to hand form this and run it in there, and then use the compression fittings that go on there. Just on these compression fittings, you can barely see this here. You need to remember to take this part and the compressor ring on the inside and slide it back up this sleeve, and then push this on up until, well, you ream it out with a reaming tool like we talked about. Push this on all the way, then bring the compression ring and this nut down on there and tighten that up. So that's all shown in the instructions. There we go. Again, there's this nut compression ring underneath that, but you slide this, after you ream the end of this, you push it on there up until it's against the back, and then bring these up and tighten them down. Now this is one of the clips that the kit came with. Came with a lot of these clips, and they're good. I like the clips. However, there's a problem I ran into is this hole is recessed, and the screw head is supposed to fit down inside there and then tighten up down low in there. But the screw head was too big to fit down in that hole, as you can see here. So that wasn't going to work. That screw wasn't going to engage the toggles, and it's just not very strong having it in that position. Plus, it's going to rub on your pipe, and it shouldn't be there. So what you saw in that previous picture back here, this is in a drill press, and I set my drill stop so that it wouldn't go all the way through, but I drilled this hole out bigger to match the screws, so the screw would go down in there like this. So it wasn't too hard to do, but I had to modify them to work with those screws that came with the kit. So if you use your own screws, you have to judge accordingly. I eventually, on some of these, I switched over to a flooring screw or something similar, or a trim screw from a screw gun, and I also would have had to drill out for those as well. Here's those toggles I was talking about. If you buy a kit like this from another store and not off of Amazon, it may come with better screws and whatever. But again, I found these toggles they were worthless in drywall, and these screws were pretty cheap screws, not real sturdy. I had some of these toggles that were hammer in toggles, and I chose to use those instead. In most cases, using the screws that came with the kit, but using these toggles here, and they held a lot better. And this is upstairs where I ran that line up next to the I-beam, and I pulled the line over here, formed it over here, and mounted one of the blocks here, and with a ball valve on here to turn it on and off. Um, but four of those toggles in the drywall, one of the clips right here to hold the pipe. There's a close-up, and kind of messy right there. There, I cleaned it up a little bit, but that's that one. And there's a close-up of the clip. They hold really well. The instructions say to have a clip every 5 feet, and in this case, it was a short run, so I didn't have to worry about that. Now this is on the other side of the upstairs loft, and this line had to go down through the floor, not next to an I-beam. So it shows this one mounted vertical, but they're ready to go. My resin 3D printer stuff here. So anyway, drilled it through. This here I required a 1-inch hole through the floor and down through the ceiling. Now to get to that other one on the other side of the shop, this is where we come off the compressor, and I hand formed this blue line and run it across the ceiling with these clips again every 5 feet. And then I ran it to a T and then ran it down here, and this is where I went up through the floor to that other side that we were just showing you. If you look real close right here, you can see an extra hole. That's because I drilled it in the wrong place. Uh, I'll show my mistakes. I'd be glad to, but yeah, I drilled that one in the wrong place, so I've got an extra hole in my ceiling there. There's where I went. I used a right angle and went right up through the hole. There's the extra one. That's a added feature. Then back up one here. From that T you saw back here, from here I ran this a long ways back along this beam to the other side, to the back end of the shop, and then the loft goes on around the other side. You can see the loft over here. This one here has got drywall and it's air conditioned and whatever. This is just storage, but it wraps around the entire shop. And I have an open bay in the middle here for boats and things like that. So I wanted to run the airline all the way back near the back of the shop, around the back, and then back out here. And what we're heading for is this other side of the shop over here. So a long run there. That's the run that's going to take 100 feet. Then we turn the 90-degree corner, come over here, and come down this post and mount it here. So this is, again, on the opposite side of the shop from that compressor, and that's where we installed that one. These clips here that go straight into wood, all of these that go right into wood, I chose to use my screw gun screws that were the same length as the ones that came with the kit, but they were better screws, and put them in through here. Okay, and there's what the finished product looked like right there at the compressor, where we have the two lines. This one going upstairs, that one going over. Well, at that point, I was essentially done with the main project, and that's running the airline where I needed it. Then I decided to go ahead and hook up the things I was going to use there. Now, the one by the 3D printer is what you see here, and I needed an air nozzle to help blow the alcohol off the parts after I washed them. So I added this dryer and regulator on here with this coiled hose, and on the end of it is a spray nozzle. And then on the one that I installed on the beam on the opposite side of the shop, I didn't have a dryer on there because one Menards was out of them, but I installed this quick disconnect and a regulator on there. And then the first line I ran upstairs, I connected up this dentist drill type thing to that with a regulator, so I regulated it down to 40 or 50 psi, a dryer on that, and that's basically the end of the project. Now the good news on all this that really made my day is when I got done with all this and pressurized it to test it, I was worried that I would hear some pops where all these joints and connections were coming off because I've never used these before. But the good news was that I not only did they not pop loose, but I have no leaks anywhere in the system. I have filled it up, turned on the air pressure, and then closed the valves and come back the next day and it's still holding pressure. So there are no leaks, not even small leaks, anywhere in the system, which is great. One added benefit is that these, with 150 feet of line installed, I did AI. I used AI to do a quick calculation, and those pipes add about 34 gallons of capacity to my air system. So the lines themselves have about 34 gallons of air in there, and if it's holding it and not running out, that's just extra air storage I have. So that's the end of the project. I will put some part numbers in the description for the main kit that I got for this, and maybe a few other things. If you have any questions, make sure you leave a comment, and be sure to like and subscribe while you're at it. But if you leave any questions in the comments, I'll do my best to answer those. Thanks.